What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of a Draftkings First Look. This is Week 13, taking a first look at a Week 13 NFL DFS main slate lineup for Draftkings. My name is Jared Block. I'm going to be breaking this down for you on RotoRadar's daily fantasy sports channel on the YouTube. So thank you for checking it out. Feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have not checked out the FanDuel video from Week 13 already that we recorded yesterday, feel free to go and check out that video after this one. We're going to keep things short today, like we said just a few moments ago, and walk through this first look, recording this on Wednesday, November 30th, so right before the month of December hits. And so we have a lot to talk about today. We got some positive news as of this morning, and it's going to continue to roll out as we go on through the stream in this afternoon. But lots of stuff still up in the air. Got a few quarterbacks and some key games that we have to take a look at. Running backs are pure Week 14 or Week 13 scenarios here for the NFL season. And as you should expect, there's a lot of guys that are going to be not practicing throughout the entire week and still being good to go on Sunday. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. On DraftKings for quarterback, we have two guys above 8K. We have Jalen Hurts going up against Tennessee, and we have Patrick Mahomes going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that obviously both games are fantastic, but Kansas City, Cincinnati is going to kind of highlight things as that is the game of the week this week. And this is, it could be the game of the year. It was one of the games of the year last year. And this is going to be somewhat of a revenge spot for the Kansas City Chiefs. And for those of you who did not know this, I just saw a stat this morning that the Chiefs are 26-0 in November and December throughout Patrick Mahomes' career as a starting quarterback for that team. So it's an impressive stat, 26-0, and they get to go up against Cincinnati here as the favorite. They're 2.5-point favorites right now currently on the road. This game total sits at 52.5. I think that you got to stick with what works, right? Mahomes at 8,300. This was a guy that I think many people shied away from last week, and I don't blame them. I was in a similar situation. I didn't think that they necessarily were in the best spot for daily fantasy because they didn't really have to do much with the football, and they're more conservative at home, which again should bring into the point here of being away from home should result in them having their normal 60+% pass rate above expectation when it comes to how many passing plays that they run. So I think that this is a fantastic spot for Patrick Mahomes, and he should bounce back from that middling performance of 22.4 DraftKings points. So I think the 300-yard bonus is always in play here. 8,300 feels like you're getting what you should be getting from him, and he always has that chance if this game gets in a shootout to where there's 30-plus DraftKings points put up for Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not going to rule him out in cash yet. It's not always the best thing to do in this scenario. We do have a lot of running quarterbacks on this slate and other quarterbacks in really, really good spots. So I won't say that Patrick Mahomes is the best QB on the slate, but he definitely has one of the higher upsides for 30-plus points here in Week 13. Jalen Hurts, 8K. Same situation as Patrick last week, where we didn't know if Green Bay was going to press the Eagles enough. Instead of Mahomes' situation, Jalen Hurts' situation definitely went in that direction. The Packers did push the Eagles a little bit, and the game was a lot closer in that final box score than it actually was in that second half. But for the first half, obviously, he had over 100 rushing yards in that first half. So 32.82 DraftKings points is something that I would have expected in that matchup. I also think that if we're looking at this from just a straight-up Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes situation, I think many would side with, I think the sharper play would be Jalen Hurts, right, with the rushing floor and everything involving around that Tennessee team. So the one thing that Tennessee does very, very well is they are a pass funnel. They stop the run. They kind of try to force you to pass. And you saw what that did to the Cincinnati Bengals last week, who could get nothing done on the ground. I do think that Jalen Hurts is a little bit of an exception to that, but he will be forced to pass this week. So I think that there's actually somewhat of an upside here for 200-plus passing yards for Jalen Hurts. And obviously I think 2 or 3 touchdowns in his pocket is definitely up his alley there. I think that the public would probably side with Patrick Mahomes. So again, the sharper take, where you're probably going to see a lot of touts go, is Jalen Hurts. But when you're just talking about these two quarterbacks here, I think Patrick Mahomes is going to be the guy that the public flocks to in tournaments. I don't think many people will go here in cash games just because it kind of restricts you for what you can actually do here. But I do think that Mahomes is, I'm not going to say a lock for 300 plus passing yards, but it certainly is extremely close. And again, I want to look at this one more time because I didn't get to see it, but I was going to see how many times in a row he hit 300. So you have 5 there, 6, and then he barely missed 7. So yeah, it's pretty much not a lock, but it's pretty close. And he has the ability to get 4 to 6 Draftkings points on the ground as well. So yeah, I think Mahomes, if you're looking up at the top here, makes a really good case, and so both of these guys do. So let's move down into the range of where I think more people will go for cash. And let's start with Justin Herbert here in this Chargers Vegas game that is going to be absolutely electric. It's a game total of 50.5. It's at the same time as Chiefs Bengals, so maybe it gets downplayed just a little bit, but every single game that the Chargers and the Vegas Raiders are in just seems to shoot out and go to that very last second. Had a huge win for the Raiders last week, and we also saw the Chargers put up a very impressive stat line with Herbert as well. The big thing for me for Herbert's always been, can his weapons stay healthy, and also can the passing attempts be there? Because sometimes they go a little bit, not conservative necessarily, but you see in a couple of these games where he's like sitting in the mid 30s or low 30s in passing attempts, and I don't really love that when it comes to it. So you know that guys like Burrow, guys like Mahomes, they're going to chuck it, and maybe Herbert falls a little bit to the wayside there. I like him a lot more at FanDuel, where the price tag I think is a little bit more of a separation from the top. Right now it kind of feels like 7,200 is a little bit too much for Herbert, but in this spot against this secondary, I think that you can definitely go for it. So I like Herbert. I like Burrow. I think that against Kansas City, they'll try to play the game of keep away. So I do have some hesitations. I know that Jamar Chase being in for this game, we don't know that yet, but I believe he's going to try to give it a go. That should help things tremendously for Burrow's floor and ceiling combination. But I don't know if they're going to be in a spot where they want to just completely throw the ball 40 to 50 times. I don't think that they want to match Patrick Mahomes and try to get to that same passing attempt number. I do expect Mahomes to pass like 45 plus times in this game, and I don't really think that the Bengals this year can keep up with that. So I am a little bit hesitant to go to the Burrow spot just because I like Herbert a little bit more. I think we can talk about Tua. I'll talk about Deshaun in a second as well. And this is where the range of cash game plays start to get really, really juicy. So let's talk about Tua first. They go against San Francisco. It's a cross-country matchup going to the West Coast. It's also a really important game for Mike McDaniel and then Jeff Wilson, and there's a lot of narratives surrounding this game. It's also a matchup between two really, really competent teams. Not saying Super Bowl, but it could definitely be a Super Bowl matchup if things fall the right way. Tua has been just extremely efficient with what he's been doing. Obviously, they're catering to his skill sets. I think he got a little bit carried away last week, but they didn't really need to do much because they were up 30 on Houston in the first half. So. Or it was I think it was like 27-0 in the first half or something like that. So they really took their foot off the gas here. And my favorite part about Tua and this offense is that when games are competitive, they shoot out. Like there's no stalling, there's no nothing. It's just straight to the house every single time on both sides. Like the Miami secondary is bad enough to where they can give up a bunch, and the Miami offense is good enough with their weapons to be able to do whatever they want with the football through the air. So I think that people will be scared of this spot. San Francisco has been a top 5 team to basically every position on the DFS side of things. And when you look at this matchup, you're like, oh, this is gross, right? Like, how is Miami going to be able to keep up here? They're 4.5 or 4-point underdogs, according to BetMGM. 46.5 is the total here. So obviously not as enticing of a matchup on paper, but I think this is one of the most underrated games on the year. And yeah, I said it on the year, not even on the week. Like, I think this is one of the most underrated matchups on the year. And it's going to be at the same time as Bengals and Chiefs, and that kind of already lowers your bar in terms of ownership. So I like Tua quite a bit there. And I'm going to call it right now, Tua is a top 3 quarterback when all is said and done at the end of week 13. So we'll clip that. If I'm wrong, then I'll be embarrassed. But I think that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be a top 3 QB after week 13 is all said and done. And that's going to be tough because Mahomes is probably 1 or 2. Next on the list, I think that Deshaun Watson's spot is nice. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we can talk about Nick Chubb and how fantastic of a play that he is. We talked about that on the FanDuel show yesterday. I think that Watson, if he's going to start, he's basically a full go, right? Like, I think that he can be a top 10 fantasy quarterback this week when in terms of season long, but in terms of DFS, and especially cash games, I think he's a fine tournament play, guys. Like, don't get me wrong there. I think there will be a little bit of rust. I think there will be a little bit of chemistry issues, and who's to say they're not just going to hand the ball off 20-plus times to Nick Chubb and give an additional 5 to 7 rush attempts to Kareem Hunt and call it a day and get a win and kind of get this Cleveland team back on track and try to avoid the controversy if at all possible. So there's a little too much risk here in many, many ways for Deshaun Watson for me personally in cash games, but feel free to go there in tournaments. It's a great pivot off of Nick Chubb and his ownership there, which we'll get to when we cover running back. The guy that I want to talk about here is Trevor Lawrence, who I think is going to be the cash game quarterback this weekend, coming off of the Trevor Lawrence game, if you want to call it that, against Baltimore. I really do think that he actually did prove himself, although he and his team almost blew the game. So no one's going to talk about that. They're just going to talk about the fact that Trevor Lawrence beat Lamar Jackson when we talk about this and reminisce. But yeah, I think that Trevor Lawrence is probably your cash game quarterback this week if you look at the pricing compared to everybody else and what he's able to do in this spot against Detroit, which it's a 1 p.m. game, but if this game was in the 4 p.m. window, this game would be totally lost as well, and this is also an awesome game for fantasy. It's going to be the best fantasy game on the slate, I think. Kansas City, Cincinnati is going to be the NFL's treasure chest of just best games to watch, but this Jaguars-Detroit Lions game is going to be the best environment for fantasy in pretty much all aspects. Jaguars -1 here on the road in Detroit. It's going to be a dome environment. 51.5 is the total, which is right behind Kansas City and Cincinnati. Lawrence going to pass the ball 35, 40 times. I do expect this to be back and forth. Detroit's healthy enough to where this is going to be a situation where they should be able to be competent on offense in order to, keep stride for stride. I think this is going to be somewhere in the mix of this feels like a 30-30 type of game, honestly, heading into like the last 5 minutes of it. So I like this quite a bit. I think the Jaguars kind of found their stride here. I know that they had a bye week, so that kind of helped them in this Baltimore matchup, but I do think that this is more of a streamer play than anything else. And I'm not expecting 303 for Trevor Lawrence, but if we get that at this price, I mean, it's a no-brainer. So I think that you can go here in cash and feel really good about it. So we'll end up clicking his name for cash games. Other quarterbacks that I want to touch on just really quick before we move on. I think Kirk Cousins is somewhat interesting in this back and forth type of situation. GPPs only, though. Aaron Rodgers, if he plays, which he should, like we mentioned earlier in the Twitch stream, I think that this is something where it's more of like he's playing the Bears in Chicago, and that's why he's going to want to play and show out here. They're not mathematically eliminated yet, too. That's pure GPP. I'm playing Trevor Lawrence every single time. Derek Carr for the first time, and Kai, you're gonna laugh when you hear this, but I don't remember the exact date, but it was for the first time in 700 days, Derek Carr threw for 3 touchdowns, and I think that, like, when I heard that, I was like, "There's no way," but it is. Like, he hasn't thrown for more than 2 touchdowns in 700 days, and he finally did it against Seattle on Sunday. And look where it got him, 22 DraftKings points. So he has absolutely zero ceiling. Do not play this guy, and don't even think about it for cash games. I don't care. Like, I think that Devontae Adams is one of the best plays on the slate, again, and I'll go right back to the well on it this week, but you cannot play Derek Carr and feel good about it. Other spots, Mike White against Minnesota. I think that's interesting there for the road team. Jared Goff in the same game against Jacksonville. Don't mind that for tournaments. Marcus Mariota. I could see people going here, and I have no interest in that spot personally. Again, I'm very stingy when it comes to my cash game plays, and even at the first look, I just have zero interest in Mariota. I was going to say Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, look at that questionable tag. I think that he is in a spot where he should do very well, and he should be forced to throw. I do worry a little bit about the health of CMC and Deebo Samuel. If those guys are good to go, I think that they should provide enough of stability to be able to support Jimmy Garoppolo in cash games. But when it comes to cash, Lawrence, or Jimmy, it's clearly Trevor Lawrence for me. All right, nothing else here. I don't think we're going to get a backup QB situation. If we do, it probably would be Bryce Perkins or Justin Fields going with Trevor Siemian. Or I don't think that Jordan Love's going to play this week, so none of those guys are on my radar as of right now. Running back, we do have this spot for Nick Chubb, which I'm going to skip down to him really quickly before I talk about everybody else. On FanDuel, this guy's like almost 10K, and on DraftKings, he's at 8K, and I think that's where things get really, really interesting for him. There's a lot of really good running backs in this range this week, especially the guys that are in the Chargers and Vegas game, but I do think that Nick Chubb deserves some serious consideration, all things considered, and at the very least, even if it was Jacoby Brissett playing, this is the best matchup on paper for a running back. And at 8K, I know that Chubb struggled in 2 of the last 3 games, but he really got back on track last week against a really tough run defense in Tampa, and he put the team on his back and basically won them that game. So I think that Chubb, without the targets, without the pass game work, I think he's still mightily in play here, and he should get 20-plus touches, should get the inside the 5 work. I do think that with Watson at QB, they take a more run-heavy approach, more run-heavy than they already are, which is number 1 in the league, and I think that Chubb is mighty great on this week. Do want to talk about the other guys. Derrick Henry against Philly is a really good pivot. We saw what Aaron Jones is able to do, and I know it's a totally different running back situation, but the Packers were still able to run the ball fairly well against the Eagles, but the Eagles are getting some of their guys back this week. So while they lost Gardner Johnson, they should be getting back some of their front 7. So I do worry about Derrick Henry and cash a little bit. Probably won't be going there at 8,100, especially with Nick Chubb in the mix there. But yeah, I think he's an awesome tournament play. The guys that I want to talk about, though, I'll save the McCaffrey spot. We kind of talked about him on FanDuel yesterday, so if you want to go look back at that, you can watch the stream back on Twitch, or you can go watch the FanDuel First Look video on YouTube. Austin Eckler at 8,500. He's the cover boy for this week. I didn't want to do Nick Chubb twice, so I'm going to go with Eckler here for the DraftKings First Look. And he's coming in at 8,500. It's kind of roughly where his price has been throughout the last 6 weeks here. I understand that Keenan Allen's coming back, and that's taking away a little bit of what he's doing, but he was able to get 15 targets last week. I'm not saying that he's going to get that again, but we know the upside of 10, 12, 15 is there for Austin Eckler, so I think that there is some serious upside to this play, and he's only got 1 touchdown last week. This is a guy that we know can score 2, 3 touchdowns in this game. And against Las Vegas Raiders, I mean, man, it sets up to be a phenomenal spot back and forth for this game. And Austin Eckler should be a huge part of that. I'm going to look at the spread one more time because I can't remember for the life of me what it is. 1.5 points to the Chargers here on the road with a 50.5 total against the Raiders. So, yeah, it sets up to be a mighty awesome spot for Austin Eckler here. I'll decide between Austin Eckler and Nick Chubb here momentarily. Josh Jacobs, we're going to take a different approach here on this week for First Look. I think he's a phenomenal play. You look at what he's done this season in a contract year, and this is why the play has been really good. It's a contract year. The Raiders are just burying him into the ground with touches, and he's paying off. Like, I never thought that Josh Jacobs would get 51 DraftKings points, but here we are, 300-plus total yards of offense, and he got 33 carries. Like, this is just, I know it was overtime, so it was best case scenario, and he got the touchdown at the end of the game, but still, though, when you're looking at a guy that's 7,900 going up against the Chargers team that we know gives up points to running backs on the ground, that's kind of where they give up things. I do think that Jacobs makes for a phenomenal play if he's good to go. Now, that's the question, because he was coming in questionable, and he came into Friday last week with that calf injury, played through it, looked totally fine. He's probably not going to practice all week, so that may open up some spots here for potentially Zamir White. We'll talk about Zonovan as well a little bit later in this running back position, but yeah, I think Jacobs, Chubb, Eckler, one of these guys is going to be a necessity in your cash game lineup. It's kind of just trying to find out who the best one's going to be. I'll probably click Eckler's name for right now, and then we'll move on. But I do want to talk about some other guys here. Aaron Jones, 6,900, going up against the Bears, I think is a phenomenal play regardless of quarterback situation. So I think that he's a candidate to get in the end zone once or twice and has the upside to have 5 to 7 targets, and you would have expected more from him in the passing game. He did catch that 30-yard touchdown last week, but I do think that this price mixed with the work that he's getting is pretty underrated at that price tag. So let's keep talking. Travis Etienne, if he plays, would be an awesome pivot. I do want to talk about him, but I wish I knew what to say about it other than I'm a little worried because we just got a day-to-day tag for him. So I think that's a little bit discouraging. If he does play, I think he will be a guy that probably sees like 60% of the snaps, and that might not be good enough, even in the streamer spot, and I don't really want to pair him with Trevor Lawrence necessarily. David Montgomery could be interesting at 6,200, just a step below everybody else. Najee Harris apparently did not suffer a major abdominal injury, but he is going to be day-to-day as well, and I don't think he's going to practice very much this week, and we could see a situation where Benny Snell gets the action here in the spot against Atlanta, which is probably where I'm going to end up putting a guy for a value spot here. Jamal Williams is an interesting tournament option, just like he normally always is. Keep an eye on Joe Mixon for some Samaje Perine action. Mixon's practicing today, so I feel like that's kind of taking a downturn as we move on here. Dameon Pierce is a really tough spot to get right because we know that Houston is not good, and we know that they're not a good football team. The change from Davis Mills to Kyle Allen did nothing to help this spot whatsoever, and once Dameon Pierce is scripted out of the game, it feels like it's kind of over for him, right? Like they were in the Giants game, they were in the Houston game, they were in the Philly game, on primetime for at least the first 2+ quarters of it. They were in the Tennessee game, so as long as they're in games, he's going to get carries. But as of right now, I have no faith that this is going to work out for them. And while the price tag has decreased tremendously, so has the volume of touches. So I am very scared of this spot, and I think that in tournaments, if you're just in cash or whatever format you want, I mean, if you're playing Nick Chubb, you are not playing Dameon Pierce because it's just complete opposite game script of what you want to shoot for. You want to shoot for hoping that Deshaun Watson sucks and throws 2 picks and Dameon Pierce gets a really early touchdown and Houston controls the game. And I just don't see many scenarios where that happens, but it is possible. I wish that we knew what to do with the Isaiah Pacheco spot, and I wish that we could trust Andy Reid a little bit more. Now, when he says that we're going to feature Isaiah Pacheco, I was a little hesitant when we saw even 15 for 107 felt like he wasn't being used enough, and he did have a 28-yard run in that spot. He got a touchdown last week, which really, really helped him out. On DraftKings, though, I really fear that he's going to have like 15 to 18 rushing attempts for like 70 yards, and that on DraftKings just isn't enough because we know unless Jerick McKinnon's out, things are going to get really ugly for Pacheco in the passing game. So in a game where I expect this thing to shoot out, I just don't know if I love the Pacheco spot, but I do think it's always a really, really viable tournament pivot for the rest of the season because I think that this is a guy we're probably going to be streaming here in about a month in the playoffs, or a month and a half when we talk about the wild card and other playoff scenarios. And Pacheco is going to come up as a guy that's going to be probably way too cheap at like a sub 6K price tag on FanDuel and DraftKings, and you're going to be able to roster him in playoff scenario time. So I think right now, though, he's just a clear GPP pivot off of some of these other guys. Not targeting H.A. Dillon. I know that he was already he worked his way back to like a competent rushing game and got that end zone score, but I just have zero interest there. Other guys here are mainly injury dependent. I'm not going back to the Latavius Murray spot. This is where we need to keep an eye on the Michael Carter situation. I'm also not playing Kyren Williams. If Cam Akers is going to be there the whole time, then I have zero interest in trying to go for Kyren. Keep an eye on JaMychal Hasty. If for whatever reason Travis Etienne sits, then Hasty would be a play where I'd probably roster Hasty and get off Trevor to pay up for another quarterback. That's kind of how serious that spot would be. Kareem Hunt, Kareem Hunt is an awesome tournament pivot off of Nick Chubb. And I guess I haven't even, here we go. Here's the guy, Benny Snell, 4,700. If Najee Harris were to miss, I know this isn't really intriguing, but it was like a half, right? I think he came in a little bit towards the end of the second quarter, ended up getting that touchdown in that game. The volume for passing is not really going to be there, but I do think that Benny Snell is going to be that guy that takes over for Najee Harris if he were to miss. So planning ahead just as of right now, we're going to put Benny Snell in there to save some money. And even if Najee Harris doesn't go, the team showed a clear, or if he does go, the team showed a clear hesitancy to kind of push him. So I think it's a great spot. Other guys, I think Zonovan Knight makes a lot of sense here, where he's 4,600, got the bulk of the rushing attempts for this team, got a little bit of the passing work as well. We're going to put him in just as a precaution because I don't think that Michael Carter plays this week. Obviously, this is the first look, so things are going to change throughout the week, but there's a lot of spots that I want to pay up for. So as of right now, we're going to go with the trio of Benny Snell, Zonovan Knight, and rarely is this going to work out, but I mean, I think there's actually real merit to those guys being in good roles, no matter if their starters play or not. They would just push them out of cash games if one of them were to go. Austin Eckler is going to be the flex spot because of that 4 p.m. window. Now, we talked about defense the other day. I'm just going to go ahead and plug this in right away and see if it's any different. Okay, it is a little bit different. The Chargers are not a discounted team on DraftKings this week. They're 3,400. We're going to take care of this cheap defense right away so we have more money to play with. And there's nothing that really stands out. I guess Denver, but the Broncos were just so bad. Steelers at 26. Yeah, that's where we're going to go. We're going to go Steelers right now. I could see a reason for the Broncos, but I think that the Steelers are a great option. Seattle, sorry. Yeah, did I whiff on Seattle? No. Yeah, no, I'm not paying 3,600 for Seattle. No way. You can do it in tournaments, though. I think all these defenses are great. All right. Should we take care of tight end first? I think we should take care of tight end first. Normally I wouldn't do this, but since we're going to take care of it now, I might as well do it. I think Gerald Everett stands out to be another great play. I know it wasn't the best thing ever in the world last week, but I do think that he has the ability to get there if Mike Williams is out again. Kelsey, Andrews are a little bit tough to get to. I'm not targeting Andrews this week. I'm not targeting any Baltimore this week in general. Kelsey is okay, especially if you can save some money with these guys, but I think that the clear play that I want to go to is probably one of Foster Moreau or Hayden Hurst. The Hayden Hurst spot is only in play if Jamar Chase is out. If Jamar Chase is in, I have no interest in Hurst. Which, by the way, if you guys saw that block that Hurst put on the Tennessee defensive lineman, that was incredible to see last week. Anyway, Foster Moreau, 3,600 against the Los Angeles Chargers. 7 targets last week, did get that touchdown. Touchdowns in 2 of 3 weeks. I know the targets aren't necessarily super reliable, and he has this thing of like on-off kind of stuff, but I don't think that Josh Jacobs is going to be as effective this week, although I think the spot's great for them. This spot's going to be so back and forth where Derek Carr basically just has Devontae Adams and Foster Moreau and Matt Collins, and that's pretty much it. So I think that Foster makes a lot of sense, and it gives us a Las Vegas another piece of that game. So I like that a lot. All right, so we have a lot of money for 3 wide receivers, and I think this is a situation where it should be a punt running back week, and we'll do what we can to get these guys in here in this spot. I think there's some cases to be made for a lot of these guys up in this range. Like we mentioned earlier in the show, people were going to flock to Kansas City and Cincinnati, and they'll also flock to Chargers Vegas, and I don't blame them for that whatsoever. Just don't forget about Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. They're not going to be cash game plays, or they won't be the best, I should say. They'll be in the player pool, but they won't be actual guys that I'm going to probably focus on. Guys I want to focus on, Devontae Adams, who, if you played cash games with us last week, we kind of fell short because of Devontae. He had like 4 to 5 targets in the first half and ended up getting to 11, so this doesn't look that bad, right? But when you look at the game and you watch the film back, they just were not on the same page with this last week, and I don't know why they abandoned it. Maybe it's because Jacobs was doing so well. So if that's the case, and Jacobs kind of reverts back to what he was still doing, which is really good, Devontae's going to be able to pick up the slack here, and I think that in a do-or-die situation, like if the Chargers Chargers season isn't over if they lose, but it certainly knocks them down a step. But if the Raiders lose, they are done. And that is something where I think Devontae can get 13, 15, 17 targets. And this game should shoot out and finish kind of like last week did. So I like Devontae quite a bit. I think if Jamar Chase goes, you have to take a look at him. If Jamar Chase does not go, then T. Higgins is a monster play at 7,200. A.J. Brown going up against his old team in Tennessee. Now, this game is not in Tennessee, but it still is enough to be okay. Like, there's something here. There's a narrative here. The cornerbacks for Tennessee have been just absolutely abysmal, and most of them are hurt by now anyway. So I think that Brown is a fantastic option. And I do think that while I don't know if the Eagles are necessarily going to get pushed, this could be enough to have me at least consider it for cash games. I don't know if it's necessarily the best in terms of volume. If you look at A.J. Brown's volume compared to everybody else's volume, it's not close. Usually it's the other guy in this range. So I think that while Brown is a fantastic play, he's probably not going to make the first look build. So I want to talk about, we'll probably talk about T later in the week in terms of Premier content. But when it comes to a guy that I want to plug in, it's going to be between T and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and we might actually plug both of them in and see what it does for us. But Amon-Ra St. Brown had another 10 targets in Thanksgiving, went off against Buffalo, got that touchdown, and he's a guy that's, I think the floor is relatively shaky, but if we're playing Trevor Lawrence in cash, I do want at least some piece against him, and it's just enough to the Amon-Ra St. Brown is like the perfect cash game play this week. So I think that he is a guy I'm going to click right away. And then I'm going to see what we can do here. I think that Keenan Allen will be popular once again. And I think that he kind of got on the side of being pretty lucky last week. I know that it was a solid play. I had him in cash games in terms of my player pool as well, but he, I think, got a little bit lucky in this spot, all things considered. So normally not a touchdown scorer. It was his first touchdown all year, and I know he's only played in 4 games. I do think this spot is better for him, but I don't want to play 2 Chargers, so I'll probably stick with Eckler for this one and grab T. Higgins. Now, Christian Kirk is a phenomenal play at 6,300 too, so maybe we end up going that route. But right now, lots of really, really good wide receivers, so you don't even necessarily have to play the top guys either. Like, if I think that there are cases to be made where you can play the Adams, the Hills, the Jeffersons, the Jamar Chases. But I think that if you're going to play anybody, you play St. Brown. You could potentially play Kirk in the same game. And if you do that, you end up with a DK Metcalf or a Deebo Samuel, even a Keenan Allen. I don't mind a lot of those plays. And I think that that's just a really solid way to go. So we can move some stuff around here. I don't mind it. We could end up going to potentially, I don't really want to go Texans necessarily, but we could play the Broncos to see maybe if we can get up to, I think we're short of T. Yeah, we are. What would it take? Yeah, I guess we'll go from that. I guess we'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to give you guys a full lineup for this one, but I think that that's a very, very solid way to go. So where we ended up, I would have liked to have gotten a little bit more Cincinnati. Maybe we'll take a look. I wanted to see where Juju's price was. 5,700, okay. Like last week, Juju coming back from the concussion. The Rams weren't going to push the Chiefs to do anything. I think that this is somewhat interesting, right? If you want to get a piece of the Chiefs, you're probably going to go with Juju in this spot. He is a great matchup for that Bengals team. So I think that that's interesting. But again, we've talked about this before. There are not many situations where you feel really, really good about rostering Chiefs players in cash ever, especially on Draftkings. It's just a scenario where they're always priced up. They're always in the best games when it comes to this kind of stuff. And they're always the guys that you really want, but you can never get to. So anyway, long story short, if you don't find your way on Kansas City, it's not the end of the world. I do want to get some piece of that game, though. So if I had to pick anybody, it would be T. Higgins. Other guys, though, I think a lot of people may click Christian Watson's name at 5,200. Like, I know against the Bears, it's a strong matchup. He's gotten 20-plus Draftkings points in the last 3 games. The targets, I know are solid, but he's been so over efficient, scoring 6 touchdowns in the past 3 games that I just don't know if I can make the case that he's a cash game play. I think that he's interesting. I think it's a great tournament spot, but I don't think that this is a cash game play with the amount of volume that he's getting, turning it into literally top 1% outcomes every single week. Eventually, that's not going to work out for you. Astro, T. Higgins is him. Certainly is. Amari Cooper, hockey fan, I worry about the fact of chemistry with Deshaun Watson. I think the matchup is just fine, right? If Derek Stingley misses again, which I think it is a might, then you can have some interest in Amari Cooper. The price tag on DraftKings is very, very solid, and he has games in him, but I also worry about the home road splits, which he did break that trend. Amari Cooper is notorious for being terrible on the road, which he was terrible on the road every single game outside of this Buffalo one, which he went off for 8, 113, and 2, and really shoved that hold take in my face there. But outside of that, I think they'll be very, very run heavy, and you could easily replace Eckler for Nick Chubb in this spot. So I think that's kind of where I'd go with that. Donovan Peoples-Jones, to your point, Kai, is certainly a guy we can look at. He's going to be a guy where I don't necessarily think that you have to pay down this week at all. I think people may even look at, where is he now? Garrett Wilson's 5,300. I know it's like a $1,000 difference basically from last weekend, but people may force this Garrett Wilson spot in again. I don't think you have to go down that far. I think you can honestly, you might have to, depending if these guys don't pan out for you. But I think that this range is actually pretty healthy here. So whether you want Garrett Wilson, Cortland Sutton's something of interest, Christian Watson, George Pickens, it's a really nice range of guys. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 4,900 is kind of in the bottom end of that range. But in terms of, like, if you think Amari Cooper is going to have some issues here on the road, Peoples-Jones has proven that he's gotten this. But again, quarterback change may throw you off to some things. It does kind of fit Watson a little bit more. And I feel like maybe the chemistry is maybe a little bit better with Peoples-Jones, but honestly, we can't make any of those assumptions right now. So I think we'll probably end up calling it on that one. But I do actually want to circle back here and potentially look at one of these guys. Like I just said, Watson's not really the best cash game play, but this range is interesting. Deontay Johnson hasn't caught a touchdown in like 70 targets. I feel like we could try to get Juju in here, because I feel like if I'm going to give you guys a first look, I know it's just as simple as like a first content look kind of thing, but I do want to give you guys the ability to use this and potentially make pivots off of things. So if you in the case that Michael Carter or like one of these plays doesn't pan out, I want to be able to give you guys flexibility to be able to do something here. Quez Watkins, if running Jalen and AJ, you can certainly do that in tournaments. I don't mind it. But yeah, Zay Jones is interesting. I know that we're already playing Christian Kirk, so I'm not going to do that. But 2 pass catchers with T-Law is extremely cheap this week and makes for one of the cheaper game stack bring back type scenarios. I'm off the Drake London train completely, although this is a really good matchup for the Atlanta wide receivers. And Nico Collins presents some interest. Randall Cobb against Chicago presents some interest. People will forget all about Tyler Boyd, Corey Davis. Mac Hollins is somebody of interest, but now we're kind of getting into this fringe category here, so we'll stop that for now. But we're gonna do what we did the other day, and I think we're gonna end up going with George Pickens at 5,100. And then we'll be able to kind of give you guys the ability to do whatever you want, because if you want a 2K defense, then you can upgrade from running back and go from there. So that's where we're going to end things today. I appreciate it. We're going to end the YouTube video now, and we'll continue to stream on Twitch here. But make sure to like and subscribe once this video is out on YouTube this evening, and you'll be able to refer back to it again if you haven't listened to the FanDuel Week 13 first look that we recorded yesterday. That's up on YouTube now. Feel free to like and subscribe to that one as well. RotoRadar Daily Fantasy Sports on YouTube. And as always, my name's Jared Block. Good night and good skill.